All right, hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRSC Now, on WRSC Plus, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you get me. Got a pretty special edition of the show today. We're kind of turning our attention over to the Richmond Kickers. They've got a couple of games underneath their belt at this point, currently sit fourth in the USL 1 standings, and have the pleasure of bringing in the man himself, the coach of the Richmond Kickers, Darren Sawatzky. Coach, thanks so much for stopping by.
Nolan, good to be here, man.
Did I say your name right? It is Sawatzky, right?
It is, man. I feel like it's pretty phonetic, but people definitely brutalize it all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. For our fans that maybe aren't that familiar with you and your background, how long have you been in Richmond? Have you enjoyed your time here in the River City?
Yeah, my wife and I love it here. It's our new home away from home. Being a professional soccer player and coach, you move a lot and you have a lot of opportunities, but Richmond's really been a great place for us.
I was admittedly kind of stalking your Wikipedia page before this. Spent a lot of time on a lot of different teams over your playing career, originally from the West Coast. And then if I counted right, I think 13 teams, maybe 14 different stints in just a few years. So you really got a good idea of, the professional soccer landscape. What was your playing time like? And for those that don't know, he would eventually to go on and post nearly 100 caps with the Sounders, spent some time in Portland as well. And you were drafted out of college to New England in the first MLS draft. So, your playing career, what are your memories like? I'm sure it was wild to be in sort of many different places.
I could talk about it for a long time, but when I was coming out of college, Major League Soccer hadn't started yet. So I actually went down to Mexico, was bouncing around Mexico City trying to play. And, when Major League Soccer came around in '96, I was part of the group that helped start that. It was pretty cool. And it's a really cool adventure. It happens really, really fast. And, I tell the guys every day, I'm like, relish it because, you're going to blink tomorrow and everybody's going to forget your name.
Um, and then the transition to coaching, you kind of stepped to different places. You did a little developmental at times. You were at high school at times. And then now being with the Kickers, you were in USL 2, now USL 1. What's that journey been like, going in from different ages to, kids that are real young to older?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I did a UEFA badge and the French formation license, which pretty much allows me to operate any academy on the planet. I ran the Seattle Sounders Academy for 8 years in MLS. So my background in coaching is really in player development. It basically developing a player into a pro, helping them move on and make as much money as they can. And we've applied that right to Richmond. I've been really lucky and grateful to have a lot of opportunities. But we're putting everything we can into the Kickers right now.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about that. That kind of seems, I just got here 10 minutes ago. That's no secret. So I'm kind of learning as I go here, right? But it seems like that is kind of the focus, especially over the past few years, to get the Kickers Academy, stronger and stronger. Growing up, I played out in Churchland over in Portsmouth, and I used to come to these tournaments and play the Kickers all the time. So I was very familiar with the brand, and it seems like y'all have taken it to the next level now. What has it been like to see that growth, even in the 4 or 5 years that you've been here?
Yeah, the big difference is there's been a lot of great people running, soccer at all levels in Richmond for a long time. What we're trying to do is modernize the player development pathway the way they do in Europe. And, people don't like change. It's really difficult. In Europe, you're playing and developing to try to play at the highest level. And by the time you're 15, 16, 17, there's a decision on whether or not you're going to be a professional. In our country, we have the whole attitude that you go to college and then you graduate and then you become a pro, and that's just too late for soccer players around the world. So we're trying to modernize it. It's difficult. People don't like change, like I said, but we currently have 8 teenagers on our pro team playing significant minutes. So we're really proud of that, and we're going to continue to work at it.
Yeah, one thing that's special about what I've seen with the younger guys and the support, it seems like, is there from in terms of supporting those guys, but that's the support for the team as well. Were you surprised with the amount of fans that come out to Richmond Kickers games? I mean, I see these, the highlights when you guys go on the road, and it's definitely not quite as boisterous as some of the Richmond home games are. Do you get that sentiment as well, that it's a little different here than maybe some of the other teams you guys play?
We have the best people in our league for sure. There's no question. Some of the new teams, Naples and others, are starting to draw some big crowds. Madison draws big crowds, so the league itself is getting bigger and better. We're starting to see that in other places, but we've been around for over 30 years. And we're the longest continuously running pro team in America, and there's a reason why. It's a great community here. They come out and they support us, and I joke all the time. I think we get everybody's best game because when they come to play us here, it's the best field and the best atmosphere.
Um, I know this is still a few years in the distance, and we've spoken about it before, but back in March, the league announced the idea that here in a few years, there's promotion and relegation, and they're going to bring in a league higher than the Championship League. Is that a bad thing for Richmond, and that now that going from, Division 2 to maybe now Division 3, or is this a good thing in that, maybe one day Richmond could be playing like Birmingham Legion or something?
Yeah, it's always a good thing. Promotion relegation is a merit-based system where the better you do, the more you're rewarded. The hard part is that in Europe, there's big TV deals. So when you get promoted, you get a windfall of cash. And, the USL is still working on that. The Richmond Kickers have played in the USL Championship. They've played in many different leagues. And, we're not naive. We know that there'll be an investment that comes with getting promoted if we're able to do it. But, Rob's really, really supportive. Our club works really hard to try to put resources together. So we're all excited about it. We think that's what the true game's supposed to be about.
And I think as a normal fan myself of the game, I'm excited about the prospect of promotion and regulation. I think that's something that obviously has been missing with the MLS. Years from now, I know this is all hypothetical and whatnot, but could something like that maybe shift the tide from the interest to maybe the USL compared to the MLS, or is honestly, is the MLS maybe just maybe that next tier with just the amount of money that is already pumped into there?
Well, I'm gonna just say this. I'm not gonna tell you how old I am, but I was around in the old NASL days. I went to those games, so I've seen almost every incarnation and acronym for a pro league in America. And I have a lot of respect for Major League Soccer. I played in the league, I coached in the league, I was there a long time, and it's a sustainable Division One league. But the beauty of the United States is it's a free market. And it's a massive country, and there's an opportunity to do something a little bit different. And I really commend the USL and the leadership there on taking this on, because if you really want to compete with the rest of the world, if you want your male national team to win World Cups and that stuff, we're gonna have to get on the same level.
Yeah, and speaking of your playing days, I was, during my research, I did manage to find this video online I wanted to bring up to you. It's an old Darren Sawatzky goal, and I wanted some commentary on this celebration he gave us right there. Do you remember that goal, and do you have any fun anecdotes of your time playing in MLS?
Yeah, I got a ton. That was July 20th, 1996. Uh, Scored a goal against DC United. We ended up winning the game 2-0, and it was actually the first full nationally televised game on ESPN. And I think every single person I knew on the planet watched the game, and I got 100 phone calls. This is before cell phones and all that stuff. So, great memories. I think there was almost 30,000 people there, and I have no idea what the celebration is. I was just an excitable young kid, and I scored a couple goals and we won a game. So good times.
Yeah, that's great. What was it like to kind of be in that inaugural draft? To be honest with you, Coach, that was kind of a before my time. But to be a part of that, first draft, was there buy-in in the country? Not to give us a whole history lesson here, but you're a part of something that was brand new and now has, you have Messi playing in Miami and all these massive names.
Well, the first thing I would say is there were only 10 teams, and on each team there were 15 Americans, right? So if you do the math, that's 150 players total that really launched the league that first couple of years. There were players that came in and out, but I feel really fortunate to be a part of that. Since then, many of those players have passed. It's a really small group of people that actually launched the league on the player front. So, again, I'm super grateful. The one thing I think people forget is they think it's so much bigger and better now, and they're certainly getting paid more money. But I would tell you, there were players in that league, Carlos Valderrama, Echeverry in DC. These guys are world class players. Leonel Alvarez, they could play in the league now and be superstars. So it was a pretty good level. We're all really lucky to have been a part of it, and to watch what it's become is really amazing.
That was right around the same time that the World Cup came to the United States for the first, or back in '94. With the World Cup coming to North America once again, I mean, I'm sure you saw the growth firsthand of the sport in the country. Do you think that it'll have that big of an impact again, or is maybe social media and, everything else, and it'll just get swept under the rug?
Well, first, we Americans put on a good show, man. We're as good at putting on a party as anybody. So we put on a good World Cup. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. But the reality is, our national team has got to do better in order for the American public to get behind it because we like winners. We like the underdog,
Yeah.
but we like people that win. And we're 100 years behind. And I go back to the player development piece that you said before. In order for us to do what they do, we got to replicate what they do because they kick our butts. So we're working on that. We're working on that in Richmond right now, and it starts at the grassroots level. So, I think the World Cup's going to be amazing. Hopefully our team does, better, gets out of the first rounds and maybe advances. But, in the end, Americans like winners, man.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point with I'm trying to, there it goes. The development piece, right? Like I grew up playing club soccer. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of kids that are playing soccer, and it just seems like we can't catch up with the rest of the world. I know we're doing it here in Richmond, but elsewhere across the country, is this a trend everywhere that what you guys are doing?
Uh, kind of. The reality is it's really hard to change things. In America, youth sports, youth soccer in general has really driven from the bottom end up. Around the world, it's top down. You're trying to get to the pro team around the world. Not that you aren't here, but youth soccer in America is a massive business with tournaments and all of this money. And it's more important to most people to make money than it is to actually evolve the game. And that's the hard part, right? We want to try to do both. So it's apples to oranges. In other countries, they develop through principles and methodology. Here, we'll bypass player development so that we can win at 11, 12, and 13 and get trophies. So it's just something that's got to evolve. We don't want to lose that winning mentality, but we also, in order to catch up with the rest of the world, we got to look at what they do and we got to replicate it.
Yeah, I think you're a good person to talk to about, you know, maybe being a little bit behind. You also spent some time as an international league coach, coaching Guam. What was that experience like? Obviously, that's a very small country, so it'd be to have a lot of success there. But to kind of see that part of, being a coach, that's very rare.
I'm lucky and grateful. I got to take Guam through part of qualifying. We played North Korea in a qualifying game, and almost won the game. 10 minutes left, we were tied, and we had a penalty kick, and our kid smashed this ball, and it went off the crossbar. They counterattacked and scored on us for us to lose. So that would have been my big claim to fame. But to have exposure to that level and to see that level of player when you get to see it is pretty amazing.
Um, kind of going back to the Kickers now, middle of the season. I know we haven't talked about this year's team much. This Friday, you guys are at home hosting Greenville. 7 games into the year already, right? I mean, we're almost a quarter of the way through at this point. It feels like it goes by so fast. I'm sure it does for you. How do you like the guys this year? Kind of middle of the table, 3-3-1. What's kind of your takeaway so far?
Yeah, we're probably sitting right where we should on paper. We're one of the teams that has to do a little bit more with less. As I mentioned, we got 8 teenagers on our team. We're very selective in the veteran players that we bring in, and we've got some amazing guys this year, both guys that have been here and guys we brought in because we have to get it right. We're not one of those teams where if we have an injury, we can go buy another veteran guy. We gotta develop it within, and we're really proud of that. There's a ton of Richmond guys here, both veterans and kids, and this is a fighting team, man. We're real happy with them.
I've heard you talk about that before. These other teams are able to, bring in somebody if somebody gets injured. Is there more buy-in in terms of these other teams? Is this a recent thing that's happening, or is before it's always kind of been Richmond's a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to just pick up somebody from MLS Next, for example, or is this buying or in bringing in new players at this level? You've seen that expanded just in your short stint here.
I just think that our ownership group, Rob Ukrop's an amazing guy, and all the people that he brings in to work on this, we're working to make this a sustainable business as well
Yeah,
as a pro soccer team,
absolutely.
and in order to do that, you got to develop players, sell them on, and you also got to be fiscally responsible. When you've been around for 30 years, you know the pitfalls, you know what it takes, and a lot of these newer teams haven't learned that yet. So they're emotional, they want to win, and if something happens where they think they need to go spend more money, they do. We're working to do it in a little different way. We're trying to develop from within and have the resources go towards the long term rather than the short term. And it's hard. We take our lumps, man. Trust me. The fans let me know about it sometimes when they feel like I could have done a better job. But in the end, we want the Richmond Kickers to be around for another 30 and another 30 and another 30, right? So this is the way to get that done.
And last question for you before I let you go. I know you got a busy schedule and we started a little late here, but do you have any favorite moments or memories from your time in these 5 years you've been in Richmond?
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, we won the Players Shield in 2022. When I came in, the team had been not doing as well as maybe it could, and I promised a trophy within 3 years, and we got one. And that was when we made the shift towards player development. So I'm proud that we won the fans a trophy, and we're working to go get more. The fact that we've instituted the youth pathway, we're really excited. But what's most important is the connection of our team to our community. Rob Ukrop likes to say we're a community team that punches above their weight. And every one of these guys cares about Richmond. They're involved in the community, and it's not the same everywhere. This is a really special team, and we want people to come out and check it out.
I do want to just one follow up on that. Obviously, the player development stuff's been going on for a while, but the really buy into it, that's not something where all of a sudden, just because now you're going to focus in on it, a 17-year-old turning 18 now is, pro ready. How long will that take in terms of, really focusing on that to see the progress that I'm sure you have envisioned for that?
When I was in Seattle and I ran the academy and we had every resource you could have, it took us 5 years to sell our first player. DeAndre Yedlin, we sold to Tottenham Hotspur for a very large amount of
Yeah.
money. We're already discussing that with some of our players, and we're just under really 2 years into this. Really to see the fruit of this thing, it's going to take 5 years. And, we're going to try to do it tomorrow. We're trying to. We're also trying to win games. I know the fans can see that. So we're trying to do both, man. I'll tell you what, it puts some more wisdom on my beard, if you know what I mean.
Hey, you got a good look, coach, but I appreciate your time. Good luck this Friday. Greenville's, South Carolina, Greenville's coming to town, 7 o'clock. And then you guys are on the road for a while. Won't see you for a month back at home on May 31st. Coach, thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate you, Nolan. Appreciate all the coverage, man.
Yep. We love doing it. All right, well, that was head coach of the Richmond Kickers, Darren Sawatzky. Thanks so much for him for taking the time, talk a little Kickers soccer. I feel like we got a really good insight there on what they're trying to do over at City Stadium, and they're just a few years away, it feels like, from, really seeing this development thing happen. And with the World Cup right around the corner, the Olympics coming as well, we could see a boom for soccer, not just in Richmond, I think worldwide. But anyway, that's going to wrap another edition of 8Sports Nightcap. They're back at home on a Friday night. We'll have the highlights coming up on 8 News at 11. Good night, everybody. Until next time, we'll see you next week.